Being hated by your own parent is an experience I would not recommend or wish upon anyone. But if there's anything that can make you feel somewhat better about what happened to you, is that if you have failed and you're hated by your emotionally immature, toxic, and narcissistic parent, then that means that you did it. You stayed true to yourself. And in a way, if this is you, I want to say congratulations for failing your narcissistic parent, because this tells me that you somehow, amidst all of that mess, stayed true to yourself. Because there's nothing that a narcissistic parent, a toxic, emotional, immature parent hates more than a child with their own personality, their own flavor, and their own light. So let's get into this. So why does a narcissistic parent actually hate and dislike their own child? You ask. How is that even possible? How can you not like your own child? How can you claim you love someone you do not like? Well, narcissistic parents have the emotional maturity of a 5-year-old bully. So the things that they don't like about you and they don't appreciate about you are usually just things that make it difficult for them to control you. And so we start by let's me just start then by explaining what a narcissistic parent really hates about people, what about and especially about their children. So what they don't really like is when their own child doesn't need them. Because you being independent robs them of the power dynamic that they wanted to be in, where they would be in control, right? So they could be giving you money, giving you freedoms, giving you permissions. When you are independent and do not need them, then they have no way of exercising that authority. The narcissistic parent really hates it when you set boundaries, because they cannot control someone who sets boundaries. That's not what they cannot do that, right? The narcissistic parent hates it when you speak your truth, and when you actually you are in touch with truth, because this means they cannot mold their reality and, sort of gaslight you out of your own reality to hide their own shortcomings. The narcissistic parent really hates you exposing them because they feel humiliated. And also you just telling them anything that has to do with them and how they parent you. They will never take it as feedback or just this is your experience. They will take it as an attack. The narcissistic parent hates it when you are succeeding, because then they feel inferior to you and they will try to rob off that sort of victory by saying that they had something to do with it or it's only because of them. They hate it when you choose others over them, when you choose your partners, your friends, your own life, your work, anything. They want to be the priority. They hate it when you don't buy into their manipulations, because they still see you as this 3-year-old they could mold and hurt. They hate when you are aware of your self-worth, because that means that they cannot shame you or force you into trying to earn their acceptance so that you can feel worthy, because you loving yourself, you feeling appreciation for who you are, means that you're not able to be manipulated. They're not able to manipulate you. And what they also don't like is someone with a sovereign mind that questions and sees things clearly, right? So this overall is what people like that hate. So obviously, if you've done any of those things, and you probably have, they specifically said to you that they do not like you, they cannot stand you. And they told you other things, I'm sure, really horrible things. But coming from someone who only bases their self-concept upon how much more they can overpower someone else and how much they can control them, you can see that those are not bad things. What I want to break down is a little bit more specifically, though, what really it means when your narcissistic mother hates you versus when your narcissistic father hates you, in a way to show you that the things that they hate about their daughters are things that are specifically would make you you and actually are empowering for women altogether, right? So let's just break them down. If your narcissistic mother hates you, this probably means that you stopped playing small, that you stopped needing her approval, that you started seeing through her manipulation, and that you developed your own mind and she cannot control you anymore. You stop serving her as her emotional supply, and you mirror back to her who she really is by you, speaking up and saying things. She's seeing herself, and she does not like that. And your narcissistic mother probably hates you when you set boundaries and when you become the woman that she was afraid to be, right? Because narcissistic mothers will train you within the patriarchal system that wants women to perform so that they can belong in this world, right? They want you to be the good girl. And they don't want you to rebel. They don't want you to be yourself. They don't want you to speak up. They don't want you to do all these random things to your hair. They don't want you to feel confident in a body that it's not super sort of thin and acceptable by society. They don't want you to feel comfortable in your own inner world, in your own expression of femininity, in your own urges as a human and a woman, because she was not allowed to do all these things, right? So in seeing you do all of that, those things that break you out of the mold of what the good girl is, the patriarchal sort of ideal of good girl, who is a girl who is, is a woman that acts like a girl and is controllable and pleasing to look at. So if she's hating how you look in many ways, it means you're not conforming to the standards that she wants to force you in, because those are the standards that she forced herself into because she doesn't feel worthy unless she does. Because these are things that these mothers were not allowed to exercise, but also with you doing these things, it means she cannot control you, right? You having self-trust, you having emotional maturity, you being authentic, you having boundaries, you succeeding, you being independent, these things trigger her. Because, as I said, it means she cannot control you, but also it means that she's seeing in you the things that she didn't dare to do. And that is really confronting, because a mature mother would be proud for her daughter to do more than her and be happier than her and more successful than her. But this does not apply to the narcissistic mother. She will say that she wants you to be happy, but she doesn't really want you to be happier than she was, or find a man better than she found, or have more education than her, or have more money than her, more success, or look more gorgeous than her. Because she has to be the center of attention, right? She's like a little girl that is so entitled and always wants to be the center of attention. Now, if your narcissistic father hated you, and this is my specialty because this is where I thrive, that means that you could not be controlled. Now, and I've been saying this in a lot of my videos, that both the mother and the father, when they're narcissistic, carry a lot of patriarchal values, right? But obviously the father, as a figure and a form, has much more power within these patriarchal structures that we see our world sort of built in, which means also within the family and within how he sees you as a woman, with him being a man, is the most toxic expression of toxic masculinity, but it's coming through the lens of him being your father and feeling like he has also ownership, right? So he owns you and controls you. So if he hates you, you probably could not be controlled. It means that you question him. And of course, when you question an authority and patriarchal sort of tyrant, they do not see that as curiosity. They see it as disrespect. And if he hated you, it means he probably saw in you a light that he could not distinguish. He saw in you a woman, a power, something that he is born and programmed to destroy. Because the narcissistic father is programmed to hate women, and within the fact that he feels like he owns you because you're his daughter, he feels the responsibility to protect the world from someone like you. So he needs to break you down, which is very funny because my own dad did that to me And I think the worst thing that he would want or envision me to be is someone who talks about this issue so openly. He would call me a feminist in a mocking way when I was really young, because I questioned him about things like, why do you ask others to make your coffee when you just drink coffee all day? And he was like, what, are you too much of a feminist to make your dad coffee? I said, I don't want to make you coffee. Make your own coffee. I don't understand why. I don't understand. And this whole role about women serving and little girls serving their fathers, like being their little maids, I found it infuriating. If anything, the fathers should be the one serving their daughters and setting the standards as to how a woman should be treated. But of course, the standards that they're setting is this: I'm going to train you how to be of service to men. And so if you claim to love any man, including myself, you have to serve them, which means you will always have to choose them over you. You will have to self-abandon. You will have to be who these men want you to be, starting with me and with any man, which is no coincidence, right? Daughters who were hated and were trained by narcissistic parents and fathers will go on to have partners that are very similar. And they may not be similar in looks or certain things that are too obvious, but the dynamic is the same. The dynamic is this: if you claim to love someone, you will show your love by self-abandoning, by editing and erasing yourself, because the priority has to be the man that you claim you love, be it your father or your husband. You do not exist. So when a woman is entering in any sort of dynamic of loving someone, she immediately has to drop herself, which is why we can't really seem to figure out how to have ourselves and be in relationships with men, with others in general, because we do not know how, right? So if your narcissistic father hated you, you being a daughter, it means you didn't worship him like he wanted, because he felt he was entitled to godlike treatment, and especially he needed that from you as a daughter. Because the praise of a woman and the adoration and devotion of a woman as being weak for a narcissistic man is a drug. It's intoxicating, because he gets to process his own maternal wounds. Because in all of these narcissistic fathers, they hold a big maternal wound for a mother they were never good enough for. And this is the generational sort of sequence of what happens when narcissistic mothers raise daughters versus what happens when they raise sons. But it all comes back down to the cruelty, the emotional cruelty against women, because it's all very much rooted in misogyny. Misogyny that gets even more deeply sort of expressed in sons through their mothers, because of how they unconsciously hate that mother, but then also want to possess women outside in the world. It's a mess. It's a mess. Patriarchy and narcissism are so entangled in such a deep injury of our human psyche that is continuously perpetuated, but we can heal it when we heal ourselves, when we awaken ourselves to how it has edited and poisoned us as people, as women. And then everything else just sort of shifts out of that, right? Now, if your narcissistic father hated you, as I said before, it means you didn't worship him, and you maybe held him accountable, right? You had expectations from him. Those are things that these men were never accustomed to being expected to, right? And also, especially from someone who is their daughter, right? Again, the level of ownership that they have towards a daughter makes them believe that you're just a puppet, that you will just obey, right? You're just something that he can mold and he can create so that he can live out his fantasy of being in total control, and to create this perfect little girl who worships him, and then he feels more in control, which is why in most patriarchal societies that is, and also in many settings, we can see that it's the women, especially daughters, are expected to get into roles that are so diminishing to our power, but again, in the service of men. So if your narcissistic father hated you, is because he was not able to control you. And somehow along those lines, he probably saw that he could not make you accept him. Because I think in a lot of ways, when we are not able to be controlled like that and we speak up and we say things, these fathers eventually wake up to the fact that it's not us who are never good enough for them, it's them who are not good enough for us. And that is the most painful realization, right? To have, and that's something somebody emotionally mature cannot really sit with. So instead, they will hate you. But if you're the daughter of a narcissistic father who didn't allow him to control her, then his straight hatred for you is probably just because he's responding to the fact that he can see that he cannot own and control your free and strong spirit, but also that he's not good enough for you. Right. So what will make you hated by a narcissistic parent, and specifically the father that we're talking about now, is your independence, your boundaries, your emotional intelligence, you having self-respect, you being confident, you being successful, and most importantly, your refusal to submit. It's a power game for the narcissistic father. As much as it is for the narcissistic mother, I'm just, the dynamic has a different flavor when it's like that. But what is required of you in both settings is submission and ownership, right? And when a narcissistic father and when a man hates you and dislikes you, it means that you're embodying your womanhood in a way that repels him, which means it's in a way that is free. You're free. You're somehow free and unable to be controlled. When I was growing up, my father would always say to me, I'm going to break your spirit. I'm going to break it because you have too much attitude, and I'm going to break that attitude out of you. And it's crazy if you think about it years later that we even hear those things, but someone having that intention to do that to you, obviously he did a lot of damage, but we cannot be truly broken. Because all of this abuse, and I specifically started talking about narcissistic abuse, parental abuse, because that's the core, right? But all of this abuse is aimed at, it's a warfare against our authenticity, right? And as women, it's also a war against our womanhood because it eliminates all of the elements that make us, right? It demonizes us being powerful, as being too much. We shouldn't be too loud. We shouldn't be questioning. We shouldn't be this. We shouldn't be that. And it just sort of infantilizes us into becoming meek and quiet and gentle and permissive and forgiving and all of these cute little things. And when we become angry, when we are like speaking up, when we believe in something bigger than when we have some beliefs, when we're fighting against things, we're called crazy, right? We're called too much. We're called get a life, go get married, to find something useful to do with your life rather than fight about causes that are important to you, right? And so we're being shamed out of rebelling, even when we do wake up, because within rebellion, we tend to naturally reject the paths that were given to us, which is marriage, kids, submission, and following through the life that society wants us to live, which is a life of devotion to firstly a husband and of course the kids. Now, what my message is for women that had narcissistic parents, and again, and I keep saying it doesn't matter if it was mother or father, but I cannot, even though the wound was pretty much the same, the experience had a different flavor and a different dynamic. The wound is the same though, right? You were bullied into submission. You were bullied into becoming a people pleaser, a good girl. You were bullied into being someone who those in authority can overpower, right? So that was the experience. And if these parents, you coming out of childhood, still hate you and dislike you, it means that somehow alongside them trying to do that to you, you didn't comply, right? You may have tried to comply and then eventually didn't. But what they hate in you is the fact that they failed to put you in the box that they wanted to put you in. You either failed in life and, they didn't manage to get you to be whatever level of successful they deemed appropriate, or you failed, you succeeded way too much further than their reach. And so they can't even claim that success anymore, right? So the painful experience of being hated and disliked by the very people who, were supposed to pretty much worship us, right? When we're kids, we need that kind of unconditional loving and admiration, is highly traumatic, which is what forces us into a lifetime of wearing masks, hiding ourselves, feeling toxic shame, feeling all these things. But as we progress in life and as we heal, we can see that what they hated was the parts of us that made us us, not because those parts were unlovable, but because those parts were parts that they couldn't tame, control, own, and force into becoming who they needed us to become, right? If we rejected their projections, if we didn't become who they wanted us to be, then that means we kind of succeeded at staying true to ourselves a little bit, even if our life is far from being successful in our own terms, right? At least maybe we kept something of ourselves. And so in this video, what I wanted to make clear to you is that no matter how much these parents broke your spirit or tried to break your spirit, there is a light within you that is unbreakable, untouchable. And when we do the healing work that is required, and we can begin to access that part and start living through that part, then we can become more and more ourselves, getting rid of all of these layers and these masks and these walls and all the things that we created in order to protect ourselves from the war against our authenticity. I have a session in Heal. It's one of the first sessions, but it's a session that I tell people to keep coming back to, called The Light Within. And each time we revisit this session, and admittedly, I listen to that session too often, we are reminded of parts of ourselves that are like, wake up, this is who you are, right? Our creative parts, our powerful parts, even the parts that were deemed bad, right? The traits that were deemed bad, for example, for me, one of them was my stubbornness. I was too stubborn, and I would always speak against things that I didn't think were fair. Those were the two things that got me the most trouble in my entire life. And these are the two things that I love the most about me, because my stubbornness is what kept me going all these years, doing the work that I do, and in general, surviving. It's out of stubbornness that I managed to survive a lot of emotional adversities, right? A lot of things that happened to me. But also speaking up for what's right and fair was something that got me into trouble. But I have no words. Like, why would I don't even see a lifetime where I would not be doing that. So my invitation for you today is to remember who you were, or the things about you that this person sort of tried to really bully out of you, and try to invite those parts back into you with curiosity. Basically, what I want you to do is to list and think and write about the parts of you that they most criticized or mocked or tried to bully you out of being, and see if you can find something in those parts that you actually want to embrace. Because something tells me that the parts that they rejected about you were, first of all, it's projection, it's parts about themselves, whatever, but there's somewhere within those parts hides the light of who you are, because that's what they were fighting against. Abuse only thrives when the person in front of us, the one we're trying to abuse, has no sense of who they are, no personal power, no sense of worth. And then we become that authority and that mirror for them to tell them, okay, you're good, okay, you're bad. We become the mirror, right? And that's how we can abuse them. But if someone knows what they're worth, has an internal reflection of who they are, and is okay with who they are, and they love who they are, and even the things that are not generally praised by the world, they love them. When somebody in front of you starts holding up a mirror, you're like, wait a minute, that doesn't look like me. No. And you reject the projection, which is why I always say a healed woman is a free woman. Because a healed woman who knows her worth will not allow anyone to hold up a mirror, a distorted mirror, ever again, and tell her that what she does is bad, or she's unworthy, or she's not good enough because men don't like her, this, that one, whatever. A woman who is okay with being herself and has reclaimed her own inner light and inner power is unpunishable. You cannot control her, and it's going to be very hard to abuse her, because abuse happens within the context of love. And when we break down and we really realize what happened to us, and we can see that what we thought was love was actually abuse, so we can have our eyes open. And next time that somebody claims they love us, we're going to wait to see if that love is actually loving and good to us, and it's not abuse. So if you failed your narcissistic parent, and if they hate you passionately, that tells me that that light that you have within, that we all do, is still shining, and they can see it, which is why they hate you. And my hope for you is that you do your healing work. You can do it through Heal, but you can do it through any other way. You can just do the work to find yourself and access that light again, and then live through it. Not just like have a little bit of here and there, but operate and live through the light of who you are. I'll see you soon.